Yeah.
Pardon?
Paul is.
Oh.
I would, I want to
I
stay
understand.
for the last
I
couple of
understand,
minutes.
I understand you need to, and I think that's fine. It just is gonna have me shift a little bit in terms of what, how I might approach a couple of things. So one of the things I wanna do is I would love for you guys to get up and change places and sit by them. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The three of us sit down.
So,
People that come to me.
move over one chair. Yeah, one of you gets to stay at each
Yeah.
table. How's that?
Okay.
So you run the zone then?
We're supposed to.
No, I'm not.
Do you want your water bottle? I'm bringing you.
Another water.
Yeah.
Hillary was.
You are.
There's here.
What was that, Hillary?
I said I bring you.
You said you were low status?
And I should, you should tell me to get you a drink and bring you.
I don't think you're low status. I think you're high status. And you too.
I'm no stats.
I love that stuff.
Is everybody settled?
I think my kid's hanging out. All right.
My birthday's
Ivan. So where do you,
You're all over. That's good.
Yeah.
You're more than you.
You're a deep hunter? My first one. I was one of the clutters. You who stayed in the same spot.
They were offering to not move. Accept all offers. The question was, what do we say about those people who stayed in the same spot? And because I said one person at every table should just stay. Because otherwise it might be confusing as to who. I don't know. So I'll ask the question, what do we say about those people who stayed in the same spot? And I said,
thank you.
they offered, yes, they offered.
They must be number 7 or 6.
Well, they offered, and we should always accept all offers. Yeah. Okay. In moving forward, we have 3 things left on the agenda beyond the conversation that we've been having right now. One was about standard operating procedures. One was about the budget, and even though you have nothing to discuss necessarily yet, I do think that we have a quick discussion around what are the things that are the considerations and criteria that are going to come into play in terms of how you prioritize things as a commission. And then we want to talk about kind of wrapping the whole thing together. And you know, we can call it library advocacy because I think that's what it is. The clarity that you have in terms of the responsibilities is there, and it's the role and stuff that we need to actually begin to define more clearly, right? So, do we want to, I'm going to say that if between now and 4, is it really 10 to? How'd that happen?
It's two.
Yeah, how'd that happen? Okay. 2 hours and 10 minutes. Yeah, so I think that they have unanimously all decided that because you'll lose one, you'll lose all at 4, which is fine, right? That's fine. So 2 hours and 10 minutes. So group, let's look at this. I would like us to spend an hour on our last item because it's really like something's like tying the whole day into something that makes sense. And so we've got 2 and a quarter items. I think that this is great because we can do the action planning. We've got some action planning, action items, as well as some things that I think that we can turn into a series of next steps. And I will lead you through that, and you guys will be able to contribute, I promise. So I'm thinking that in the next hour, 1, 10, looking at standard operating procedures and starting with what do we believe that we'd like to include in our standard operating procedures?
I know one way or another. SOP, I think that this, twice a year, to come back and address focal points could be a part of an SOP. Because that's the only, that's, otherwise, we have this thing where he said, she said, what do you think? You know, so we,
So you're proposing that a part of an standard operating procedure for the commission is that we would want to have biannual?
at least,
At least biannual?
yeah. And construed in whatever manner you want. I mean, Tim just pulled one out that said, what, read that language you just shared.
This is strictly from the City of Roanoke Parks protocols.
Yes.
Thank you, Barbara. And it says, the council may meet in study work sessions at such times or in such places as may be determined by the council. Study work sessions are less formal and for the purpose of hearing reports from staff, receiving public comment, and reviewing, discussing, and debating matters of interest to the city. These sessions will be noticed as provided by law and open to the public. No official actions may be taken at a study session. However, council may refer the items to staff with specific requests. And so, but it's a study work
Study
session.
session.
Yeah.
So actually, with respect to a council, a study session gives them, like you have here, the freedom to ask questions and act differently around engaging around something and getting more information and being able to maybe see something useful. Because then usually it's a consultant or staff bringing something forward and then they're able to,
Distill.
yeah, absolutely. I think that you guys are looking more probably at work sessions, which is, maybe it's culmination of committee work coming to fruition, maybe it's, a number of things. And a lot of it has to be commission building, capacity building within the commission, right? So when you want to have those conversations around strategizing who should be on the commission, right? Who should you be recruiting? Those want to happen in this kind of situation, right?
That's what I'm talking about, this
Yeah.
kind of situation, but just the construct of some language that gives it a frame of reference. And I think that you need to have a facilitator because the facilitator isn't biased towards Barbara's opinion or, Hillary's opinion. You try to bring it back to the center all the time and keep it even-handed as you start to distill this down to something that everybody can go, okay, we can move forward from this point.
Okay, Barbara?
I wanted to offer, we tried to tackle protocols just a little bit at our last retreat, and it's such a big, gigantic, thing, that I would just like to offer the suggestion that, rather than reinventing the wheel, we take an existing document and have a subcommittee, edit it for our purposes, and at the next retreat, we, tackle it.
I even have a proposal for that, which we still are debating about the issue of whether to have an all-day meeting on April or a half-day meeting on April. And if we were to establish a protocol ad hoc committee, they could meet in the morning, so we could have a half-day work session for the budget, but then that committee could have a time to get together and start developing that protocols. April 4th.
A lot of protocols are nuts and bolts.
Yeah, this document is,
blah, 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 right.
this document's a great beginning.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it's going to do.
And they, tons of time went into that, and you can't do it sitting here in an hour.
Right.
I agree with the idea of like, we want to maybe our big ideas, but I just kind of hate to start from nothing when we have a structure we can build.
Right.
Absolutely. I agree with you. So what are especially if we're going to look at committees, what are the things that you think are really important to include in the protocols? Right? So I'd like this list to be some things that we think are important to include. I actually would like to put something on there that I generated. You guys get to tell me whether or not I get to put it on here. The concept of an Anglican calendar as a protocol, I think is really important.
I like it.
Okay?
So, and maybe write down what it would, and things that it would contain, so that we don't forget. So meeting days,
So-
like lab meeting days, what do you,
So, budget cycles, right? Appointments, whether it is for the commission or for labs, appointments in terms of their cycles, right? So it would be all those milestone events that happen, so that you don't lose them, and you can always be looking ahead at how far back you need to come and schedule stuff.
and what about friends and foundation meeting days with those?
And labs.
Right. I would say labs, friends, and foundation.
And who posts this on the library website?
I believe it is a tool for the actual commission.
Okay, so it's just for commission?
I think it's for the commission. You have a half-time staff person that can help you keep that organized and maybe alert you as to what's coming up, and, and once you get into a working relationship with that person, you can have, again, it's like they can pre-screen and say, this is coming up in 3 months, do we need to schedule it now, et cetera. But this just means you're not going to miss anything, because at least the stuff you know about, this is another way of creating a pattern,
I
right?
think the example of the budget, because we've instituted a new system on the budget this year, and that we've had the finance committee look at and give proposals for the new budget. Before, in the past, the commission has been given the budget that the staff prepared. And this is the first year that we've had the finance committee and an agenda item on the agenda saying,
Right.
what are the goals of the
Right.
commission?
Absolutely. And I think what's great about this is that, again, when you bring a new commissioner on board, right? When you bring a new one on board, you can sit down and go through an annual calendar and say, this is kind of what our year looks like, in terms of, without any new things coming in, right? So when you're onboarding, you're gonna have an SOP document, right, exactly. You're gonna have an SOP document, and you're gonna say, oh, and by the way, here's what it looks like in terms of a calendar. This is the stuff that we can count on.
And which committee can I put you down?
Exactly. So, this is, and I think the SOP, that leads to the next thing that I'd like to put on the SOP, which is, what is your strategy for retaining and recruiting, right? Retaining and recruiting. So, the idea is, and I hope that all of you will take, I'm not invested in you, because in this room I'm not a resident of Sonoma County or affiliated with any specific of the libraries, because I'm here to serve you as a commission. And as a commission, as much as you are personally interrelated and appreciate each other, there is an aspect of you that has to be, that has to have a greater affinity for the whole of the commission than any individual on it, okay? So when that doesn't happen, and it happens a lot in the library world, when that doesn't happen, accommodations are made for an individual, okay? A staff person or whatever. Because supervisors or other staff, etc., don't want to hurt the individual, right? So they make accommodations. So I'll tell you a story about a person who, in another library, was no longer doing the job she was hired for because there was no need for that job any longer. And so she has the skills for and got the education for doing something else in the library, which included reference, being on the desk, working with individuals, right? Librarian work. And she had a couple of bad things happen in her life, which she actually caused to happen, okay? So she said she couldn't actually be on the desk. She couldn't be with people that much. And so they took a meeting room in the library. And because she didn't have a workspace off desk, they created a workspace where she could do technical processing work and cataloging work in silence, because she couldn't have this bombardment of noise, etc. And so they essentially sacrificed the whole of the organization, starting with their customers who lost a public meeting room, spread to all of their staff, and the library as a whole. They sacrificed the whole organization to help one person with their problems, right? And the branch manager at that library had the ability to do that. So, how might that play out in the commission?
Lots of noise,
Lots of noise about,
situation,
yeah,
like about 9 different opinions,
right.
and 9 different ways to deal with it.
I guess the question I'm asking is, how do we each hold the health and vitality of the whole commission as important or more important potentially than any one individual on it?
All as one, you know, I mean, that for me, but I still think that you, I mean, even going back to talking when Tim brought up the deal about, well, there was $2 million, you know, for Petaluma, and there was money for Sonoma, and that was pre-agreement, which I get all that, but all of those alliances were not all as one. And I understand they come from different directions, but it still is what it is, you know, and it's not one. And
Thank you, thank you. Does anybody else have a sense of what I'm trying to get at?
Well, I think you have the toxic personality issue that you have in the workplace or anything, which is what you're talking about, you know, working around something. And I don't know that, you know, that's what issue. I think what we're trying to do is develop a culture of the commission.
Yes?
And we're trying to, besides our working relationships, also look at a bigger picture. What is the culture of a library commission? And how do you work together, and how do you hold the singularity of the county system is more important than your own branch. Your own branch is really important, and you're still an advocate.
Right.
And so I think, you know, these retreats do a lot to, you know, to help us get there. But I wanted the working document, like I'm sure many people have, of, you know, our operating procedures. We're kind of floating, you know, and as Reese always points out, the steep learning curve of learning about the library and then about what we're supposed to be doing. And it is a steep, like, this is one of her favorite phrases, and I think it's very apt. And so, that's all I guess I should say.
And it's very helpful. Thank you. Yes?
I think being clear about what our expectations and responsibilities are and holding each other to meeting those responsibilities, whatever that might entail, certainly in terms of showing up and being present and prepared. And beyond that, I think we probably have a responsibility to look at the makeup of our commission and make sure it's representative of the people that we're serving, and that we run our commission in such a way that it's possible for a variety of people to take part, to serve on the commission, to come to the meetings, regardless of how that works for any one individual.
I think you're bringing up an interesting point, if I can jump in here, because we don't have any, it's not like the lab members would go out and recruit them and whatever. I mean, we're appointed by our elected body. I mean, what kind of control or influence or anything is appropriate for us to even have with, because we're appointed. I mean, we don't get to say, you're not holding up your end of the bargain and you need to be replaced.
But if, as a person in the community, if you meet somebody or you know somebody who you think would be a good addition to the commission within the parameters of making us more representative of the community, then you could talk to that person about, you know, if any of us, if our positions become vacant, there's no criteria that says you have to live in your city of where who appoints you. So people could apply. I mean, if we find people that we think would be great additions as commissioners, we could seek them out and talk to them and encourage them to apply when a vacancy comes up and support them in that application process.
Thank you.
Communication. I don't know that we communicate expectations to people. We talk about people. But do the people we talk about really know how to feel about it? Or you know, Linda should be doing more community work or more committee work or something like that. To be more direct and say, I'm coming from a place of caring, respecting you, and also not from a telling you what to do,
Yes.
but this is what I've heard. And to be engaged, though we have no power over other commissioners other than communication, we're all part of this together, you know, that kind of thing.
And I'd like to flip that a little bit in terms of, we each have power over our own actions.
Sure, that's the
Right.
only person we have power over.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, you are a commission of people who have been appointed. You didn't choose to work with each other, right? It's great that you can, that you are, right? It's great. And it's different to choose to be on a team that you already know the players on, right? Than to be appointed to a team that then has to like create a team of itself. And I think that's where you guys were kind of set adrift, right? You were all appointed separately and you come together and there's not a lot of clarity and there's what is our role and a lot of confusion in terms of the different entities at play, the labs and the Friends and the Foundation and the Commission. So, I mean, I think it's actually quite amazing that you are where you are right now. So you should pat yourselves on the back for that, really. You should. Just, let me just come back to you in just a second. I think that the point I'd love to make, Linda, is yes, the idea that you have no power over each other unless you all choose to give each other the ability to influence in a positive way the outcome of the whole group, right? So that is about supporting people when they need support, and sometimes that support might look like talking to someone about being accountable to the responsibilities and the expectations that you guys are going to eventually agree to. Right? So that takes courage. It takes courage. And it takes doing stuff like this that creates the foundation for you to be able to have these conversations, right? In terms of the interpersonal relationships. Hey, do you have no idea?